Ridgefield, Connecticut. Inland Wetlands Board. Special meeting. November 4th, 2024. IW 2421. 599 Branchville Road.
So this is the Town of Ridgefield Inland Wetlands Board special meeting for Monday, November 4th, 2024. In attendance, we have Keith Carlson, Alan Pilch, Carson Fincham, David Smith, Tim Bishop, myself, Susan Baker, and staff members Artie Faranjabe and Caleb Johnson. Where we left off last time is we circulated a memorandum of approval with conditions. And so we need to review that. And then we'll start the discussion. The conditions that we have on here. Let's get to it. That were discussed was that we needed a maintenance plan for the stormwater management systems, invasive species monitoring and seeding plan, including quantity of seed mixes for wetland restoration area, provide daily construction monitoring for bridge and roadway construction phases, including weekly reports to the IWB office and special attention to ENS prior to any expected large storms. And there is an understanding with this board that the applicant will present the Planning and Zoning Commission with established permanent trails in the open spaces on the property, along with a conservation easement to protect these areas in perpetuity. And that's where we are. Do I have any comments from the board? Alan?
I'll raise my hand. I think we should be a little more specific with regard to what we mean by maintenance plan.
Okay.
And I think the maintenance plan, as I sort of thought about it, I said shall include quarterly inspections by a licensed professional engineer of the hydrodynamic separators and infiltration practices during the first year of operation. I can print it, I can send it out to you.
Okay.
It'll
be recorded. We'll get it.
Yeah, Artie's recording it.
Yes.
And I think, quarterly during the first year and annual inspections thereafter.
Okay.
I feel that reports should be filed with the town within 30 days of the date of inspection. We can discuss to whom it would be forwarded. I don't want to say to Artie, but that'll. I knew that would get a comment out of you.
Say that again.
If we are doing inspections, a maintenance plan. So a maintenance plan typically involves inspections.
Right.
So someone has to inspect it and someone has to file a report.
Right.
My feeling is during the first year, they should do it quarterly. The reason being that if there is an issue with regard to stabilization of soils, it'll get caught.
Right, right.
And then I said during the first year and annually thereafter.
Right.
And the report, whatever it is, should be filed within 30 days of the date of inspection to the town.
Absolutely, that's fine.
And to whom it goes, I don't know.
Well, it will go to the town agent, Caleb. He will review it. And if at that point he thinks something is not being met, he can bring it to the notice of board then.
And I guess the only other item that I had was maintenance that's required of the stormwater management practices as identified in the inspection report shall be performed within 30 days of the date of inspection.
Okay. Yeah, we can put that.
I actually edited the document, so I'll forward it to you afterwards. But I was working on it here today in my usual crazy manner.
And do you have some kind of a template you want to create for the maintenance so that there is a checklist kind of a thing that they did this, list what the board's expectations are?
I don't, but I can certainly create one.
That would be a
Because-
good one, and that could be a good template going forward for if you want to keep it as for applications.
Sure. I mean, I've been myself a stormwater pollution prevention plan inspector on several projects.
Right, right. So that could be a good template. They can tweak for whatever
Yeah.
project requirements are. But if you expect certain expectations of your checklist, it will be good for Caleb or office staff to see what the board's expectations are and have they met or not. And if they haven't, they can bring it to the board that this was not done.
Sure. I will create one. I don't have it here right now.
Right, that's fine, as long as you can send it to Caleb, because Caleb will be then checking as per your checklist.
Okay. Is that why Caleb's smiling at me?
And we can always put it on our website, like Inland Wetlands Board website, as a checklist.
Sure.
Used.
Okay. I like that.
I do too.
Can I make my comment on item number 2?
Sure, while you're at it.
Okay. I know that's about invasive species monitoring and a seeding
Yes.
plan. I think the invasive species monitoring, my comment was, shall be performed by a qualified individual. Now, that could be a landscape architect, it could be a biologist, whatever. And I said annually for a period of 5 years,
Mhm.
and reports shall be filed with the wetlands agent.
Right.
We can decide whether it should be longer than that, but 5 years is a reasonable length of time for people to control invasive species.
Mm-hmm.
And one other comment I have, and it's a concern of mine, is that when they go to planning and zoning, there may or may not be changes to the site plan,
Mhm.
especially with regard to the driveways, which they modified during the time we reviewed it. You know, they
Mhm.
moved them outside of the upland review area. And my concern is that it could be modified during the time that it is before planning and zoning. And if it is modified, or the buildings could get taller, you know, they might go to 4 stories and twice the size of what they are now. Who knows what they'll do? If they do that, I think we should see it. I think we should have the opportunity to provide some additional review.
So that would be a different. Yes, I don't know how that works. Generally, they would need to come back to us if anything changed in the upland review area. But what you're saying is they wouldn't necessarily have to if what they changed is not
Well,
in the upland review area, but it would have still, if it has any effect on the stormwater management or
or the
location
wetlands,
of, yeah,
or
or
the upland
location
review
of,
area, I think
yeah.
we should have the opportunity to re-review.
right.
The only other comment I had, by the way, was in the standard conditions. Number 7, if I can just throw that out. Which really talked about the implementation of erosion and sediment controls.
Mm-hmm.
My addition to that was all erosion and sediment control measures depicted on the plans shall be installed and shall be inspected by the town prior to the commencement of any construction work on the project. That's a concern of mine. And I think at the moment, that's about it. I'll let others have their say.
Okay. Would that then, Artie, would that be better expressed as a special condition rather than changing the standard condition?
Well, what Alan said, our office as per zoning, they
Yes.
have to install double barrier of silt fence prior to any commencement of work. That's the prerequisite for that. So
Okay.
if you, as for wetlands also, you want to do it, you can put that as a condition. But like I said, when they come for a building permit and a zoning permit, the first step is, in order to get a zoning permit, is they have to install the proper erosion barriers as per our standards. If they pass, then only they'll get zoning permit issued.
Yeah, so that means already that they're inspected, correct?
Oh, yes. I mean, like I said, once they put in the building permit, they cannot automatically get it. I go out and inspect. They cannot even, the only shovel they can put is when they're putting this silt
Right,
fence.
yeah,
The only thing they have to
putting
do
the
it.
silt fence in the
Right,
ground.
right. Or if
That's
they're
fine.
using hay bales or coir logs, whatever, but it has to be a double barrier of silt fence.
Right,
Until
okay,
that is installed, they cannot get any permits.
okay.
Has to
I'm
be.
putting on my SWIP inspector hat, that's why.
Right, right. So, I mean, that's under zoning, but if you want as under, and typically if there are wetlands, me and Caleb, we both go out together to inspect that they are
Okay.
properly put in, the erosion measures, saving this wetlands and other, properties.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm satisfied.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments, additions?
Are we just talking about the conditions now, Susan, as opposed to the reasoning, or comments on everything at this point?
Comments on everything that you would like. I wanted to be sure we were in agreement on the on any special conditions. In terms of reasoning, your meaning is that, I know last time you were not in favor of approval, so
Yeah, so at some point I'd like to add some final thoughts on that, but going over the conditions first makes sense.
okay. I mean, obviously, we haven't voted yet, but that's where we left off. Anyone else on the conditions? I mean, those are the ones we talked about a little bit last time. Okay, then you could certainly go ahead with your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm.
So after our discussion last time, I went back and looked at a few things in the record and looked at our regulations again. And I have a couple issues, one of which I don't think was articulated well last time, but one clarification just for the record. When I talk about my reasoning or my decision or my vote as being something that's personal or something that is personally provided to the board, I think a better word would be individual or individually. I want to make sure that that's not misinterpreted to be either a lay opinion or just a general opinion. It's based on my qualifications and experience, and it's a professional opinion that I'm providing individually. I meant to say either individually or personally, just to distinguish from what anybody else might be thinking, but not to say that it's a personal opinion as opposed to an individual determination. So one of the things that I have an issue with is that, and I was not in the first hearing, I did review it when this was originally not scheduled for a public hearing. My understanding is that the board decided that there may be significant impacts to the wetlands, which is why this became a public hearing. And in the second hearing, the issue was brought up and I did support that, which I still do. But for me, it's hard for me to reconcile that the board went from there being a likelihood of a significant impact to being no impact. And to clarify, and unfortunately, Mr. Beecher isn't here, but my understanding is that if there is an adverse impact, it doesn't have to be significant, but if there is an adverse impact to the wetlands, which I think putting any bridge across the wetlands is an adverse impact, but also clarifying that if this was the only bridge on the property, this is probably one of the best bridges you could build, right? It's clear span. It's made out of wood, not concrete and steel, so it blends into the environment better. There's a lot of things about it that I think are great. But the problem for me is that it's not the only bridge. Um, so I think it's hard to reconcile the fact that there is an impact and it's adverse to the wetlands. And then the determination becomes, are there prudent and feasible alternatives? And I think that's also easy, whether you're just looking at the fact that there's multiple bridges or whether you're looking at the development as a whole. And I did submit papers on the record, and I think everyone understands that the more vehicles you have, the more impact there is on the amount of pollution on a site. And so here with the proposed, what was it, 78 parking spots, I think, and we're not supposed to design it for them, but if you had 74 parking spots, so 4 less vehicles, you'd have that much less pollution on the property. And I have a hard time reconciling the fact that that wouldn't be prudent. I think that would meet, almost all of the applicant's goals, but scaling back the project to fit a little more within the confines in a more prudent manner. So that's my take on it. I mean, under section 10.3 on the approval, if that's where we're headed, it specifically says that a permit shall not be issued unless the board finds, on the basis of the record, that a feasible and prudent alternative does not exist. So an approval would mean that this board is saying that there is nothing more prudent than this. This is the most prudent. Whereas in the denial section on 10.4, all we have to show is that there may be a feasible and prudent alternative. And for me, I don't know how to reconcile the fact that we'd be saying that there is nothing more prudent than what is offered, because I think what is being offered is about the largest thing they could possibly develop on this property with the space for the septic that they have. And I think even if you just drop down 1 unit, that would be more prudent. And I think that opens up a whole set of prudent alternatives that would be more appropriate on this site. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay, one thing that the applicant did state on the record was that that other bridge was not suitable for safety vehicles, fire, police, whatnot. And that was their reason. And I don't think we have anything on the record either to corroborate that or to say that it is not the case. And that's part of my problem, because we were asked, and if that's the case, then, and if it's also the case that you can't tear that bridge down without causing way more impact to the wetland, then you're forced to look at, well, this span, which we're all saying is better than any other way of putting a bridge across there, is it in the location that's the least problematic from the standpoint of wetlands? And but I think the thing about the second bridge is a problem, because we don't have it on the record
Well,
that bridge either is or is not suitable.
right. And
But we have only the applicant saying that it's not suitable.
right. And it's
and-
the applicant's burden to prove that with evidence instead of just saying it.
Yes, but right now we don't have anything on the record saying that it's not. And that's a problem, is it not?
It's a problem for the applicant, yes, because they have to prove their case. And you're saying there's
Mhm.
nothing on the and there's no evidence on the record supporting the fact that the bridge can or cannot be used.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't proved anything.
No. Alan?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I agree with Carson's comments regarding the bridge, the existing crossing as well. That, had they have evidence, like a letter from the fire department, the police department, they would have submitted it. But they didn't submit anything at all. It was anecdotal. And I think that was something that we as a board should have pressed for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and logistically, I mean, I know, well, I don't know why there'd be a hesitancy to deny something if there isn't evidence on the record. I mean, they could resubmit, right? There's nothing stopping them from resubmitting the same application, but with evidence that they can't use the the original bridge, and that would change things. It would delay things a little bit, and I guess it would probably be another application fee, which is unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world, correct? To say that this just didn't meet what needs to be met to get an application, to get a permit through. At least that's my feeling. I went back and looked at the plans too, because we did walk across the bridge on the sidewalk. It's not the widest thing in the world. It's not the narrowest either. From the plans that I saw that appear to be to scale, it's actually, it's two crossings. It's not, it's what I would call one bridge and a culvert, although the bridge itself is also a culvert. So it's really a combination of two culverts that are arranged at about 90 degrees. One of them is at least in excess of 12 feet wide, and one is more than 18 feet wide. And they're about a 90-degree orientation down there near the pond. There are much narrower and much sharper angles on a lot of residential properties in Ridgefield that the fire trucks don't have a problem getting through. So I could see how maybe somebody, if not the fire department, at least the applicant, would prefer a larger bridge, and I understand that. But in this case, I just don't think they set forth what they needed to set forth to prove a good case for why they can't use what they have and they need a new 75-foot long, 25-foot wide clear span bridge. But again, that's my individual interpretation of it. I'm not trying to convince anybody else, but I don't see the way that I'm reading our regulations is, it's a much stricter burden to show approval than it is denial.
Other comments? Okay, so if there are no further comments, and as I say, the only comment that I had was that we didn't think to get a professional opinion on the usability of that bridge for any kind of a multifamily type development there. The direct impact to a wetland is actually to that field where restoration is going to be performed. And the bridge does not cause a direct impact as it's situated. So the question is, as you say, do you deny it and assume the applicant will come back with that proof or without it? And if they did, what would that solve the problem? I mean, is that the only impediment in your mind to this decision, or is there something else besides?
Well, I think if we're looking at the project as a whole, the bridge, I think, is the fulcrum on which the direct impacts rest the most heavily. But because there is an adverse impact to the wetlands, we have to look at everything as a whole. And yeah, that's my biggest problem, is the fact that the number of bridges on the property seems excessive. Would widening the original one be better than putting in a new one? Yeah, there's a lot of different things to potentially look at. They weren't interested in looking at alternatives in the beginning when I asked them about it, though, so I didn't press them on it. I didn't fight them on it. But the rest of the property as well. I mean, it's packed in super tight. The drainage system is, it's a smaller capacity drainage system than the one on Abbott Avenue with respect to the design storm, and it's a steeper sloped site. So I have issues with that. But there's a whole host of small things like that I think add up to lead me to believe that there is something that is more prudent than what was proposed. And again, whether that be one single unit less or 2 parking spaces less or something less that fits better within the footprint that they have there, which is, it's a tough footprint. It's between, well, like 4 or 5 different wetlands. It's all snaked in there. And again, I think that the biggest issues rest on the bridges, but there are other issues for me as well. But none of them are insurmountable, right? I mean, it's not like we're saying they can only build one house on there. I think their scale is just a little too large for the site. Again, that's me individually. And I don't myself individually, I don't think what the applicant may or may not do with a denial or approval, or what a court may or may not do with a denial or approval, is entirely germane to our decision. I think we have to take the facts as we see them and make the best decision we can, and whatever other folks decide to do with that, they decide to do with that.
Anyone else? Ooh, I think at this point, we need to get a consensus, a sense of where we're going at this point, because at this, we have to we have until November 14th, and now it's the 4th. And if we were going to, instead of having a resolution of approval and voting on it today, if we're thinking about going a different direction, now would be the time to do that. And we don't have much time. So, sorry. Alan, Tim, David. I mean, at least at last meeting, we had a consensus that we would go with approval and conditions. Are we still there, or do we need to come up with something different and have it ready to vote on? Alan, we'll start with you. Since you spoke.
I think perhaps we should have that alternative to review. I mean, what Carson says, I'm very sympathetic to. There are other alternatives, I think, that were presented by the applicant, and I don't believe that we had examined them to the depth that we could have. Alternatives that would have perhaps had less overall impact, because it wouldn't involve another crossing of the Cooper Brook and additional disturbance within the upland review area. Had we gone with the existing crossing and they were accessing it for some other form of development. And I'm disturbed myself again by the fact that the applicant did not offer anything other than, as I said before, anecdotal statement that it's unacceptable for police and fire. Because if that was the case, and they know that to be the case, they would have submitted it for sure, because that would have helped to cement their case. And so I will admit I didn't feel that way before, but I do now. So I really do think we should have some alternative to look at.
Okay, but I think also utilizing that other bridge would probably put more of the driveway into the upland review area, would it not?
I'm not necessarily sure that it would, without seeing how it could be done. Maybe with a different plan, it wouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I
I
think it
mean,
would
it's
be,
something,
I think the orientation or the alignment, I should say, of the driveway would be similar to that JFM engineering plan because it went across that same spot and then it turned. And for me, a lot of that pavement already exists down in that area, right? So I mean, you would have to go down through there. But I think it's probably a lot less new pavement. I don't know whether it's more extensive or less extensive than what is proposed, but I think it would be adding more to what's already there as opposed to reorienting it in an entirely different spot, and leaving what's there, right? I mean, I think it would be a lot different. I think less of an impact. The crossing itself, I think, would be less of an impact, even if they had to widen that culvert a little bit.
Okay, but keeping in mind, I think that earlier plan didn't envision that wetland even being there. Did it? Was that not created before they discovered the field is actually a wetland?
The plan was, but if I remember correctly, and the applicant's attorney and I, Bob Jewell and I had a discussion about that specifically with respect to the JFM engineering plan and the wetland that had not been identified at the time. And I think we both agreed and discussed on the record that it looked like they might lose one of the residential lots out of the, what was it, 6 or 7 or something that were proposed, but I don't believe the roadways themselves pass through there. Passing through upland review, absolutely. The wetlands itself, I don't think the roadway was an issue with the, the missing wetlands.
Okay. Tim, do you have anything to add at this point?
I'm hearing everybody that's giving commentary, Parson and Alan, and I again agree with both. I'm still not 100% comfortable on that there will be no impacts to wetlands or watercourses with this project as proposed. But I haven't made a decision in my mind in preparation for a vote to raise my hand for no. I think I agree the most with Carson's point about the applicant having to prove some of the issues that we've discussed with the bridge. That even though we didn't have any structural engineering experts or the town opine on its ability to stay in place or be effective as it relates to the project, I agree that that's nothing we need to worry about as a board. It's the applicant that needs to cover all their bases doing their due diligence for a thorough application. So with respect to that end, I would agree with Parson. My thoughts are not to decide whether, well, if we, deny or approve the application, where the consequences in court or with the applicant. I think we're just more in the position of considering what's in front of us now, based on the record. So again, I have not, through our last 2 discussions, I've not been persuaded in either direction. I could say if I was to vote, yes, that I think the conditions that we discussed tonight are fair and accurate for an approval. I would have nothing to add to enhance what's already drafted.
David, I'm sorry, are you done? I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Yeah, okay, David?
Well, I left last meeting undecided, but leaning more towards approval. But Carson does present some very compelling points. So I guess I'm more like Tim. I don't know if I'm prepared to say no, but I'm on the fence right now.
Well, we have to be off the fence in 10 days.
I know.
So, I mean, we could draft a separate resolution of denial, put them both in front of us and make a decision. But I think the question is, we would have to have the wording for that denial resolution.
To me, it would help me if I could see both.
Okay, Carson, can you then outline your points one more time, and we will draft a separate resolution, and we will basically make a vote on it
Sure.
on the 14th.
Would it be appropriate and or helpful for me to put that together for you and just send it over to you, and then you can edit it, change it as you wish?
I think it would need to go to Attorney Beecher.
That's fine.
Artie, is that permissible? If Carson were to outline his argument directly with counsel?
Well, I would suggest it should go via Caleb.
Okay,
So members can share their thoughts with Caleb, and Caleb has to go to Tom Beecher with the denial comments or approval comments, both, either way.
right. We have to finalize the approval comments also,
Right.
which we haven't done.
Right.
So then we have both documents drafted, and as I say, we must make a decision. We will just have to vote. Is everyone going to be there on the 14th? Anyone not going to be there? Okay. Then that's how we'll handle it.
So I won't draft it up as a resolution, but as you asked, I will give you a bullet point listing of my thoughts on what I would have set forth for supporting a denial.
Yes,
Right.
that's exactly what we need.
Okay, and
The
I'll
rest
send
of the paperwork we can handle, but
yeah, and I'll send that to Caleb.
thank you.
Hmm.
You think you'll be able to do that tomorrow?
Yes.
Great, okay. Okay, thank you.
This is Kirk Carr, on the record. Thank you for watching.